You know it's a long character list when you need the find function.
Hey, thank you for joining the Escape With Me Book Club. Escape with me, Sam Reiner.
And me, Tim Bergman.
Into our most recent read. Come with us as we evade reality and go into detail about a new book. We'll be covering the book from beginning to end, so there will be spoilers. Today we're going to Mossflower Woods. Published, by the way, I could not get a month or a day to save my life, but published 1986, Redwall is the first in a series of books which looks at the happenings of the woodland creatures of Redwall Abbey. Matthias is a young mouse that seems destined to become a chosen warrior, but he will be truly tested when the evil of legends, Cluney the Scourge, shows up to take over the abbey. Can the woodland creatures keep the rats out, or will they fall under the rule of Cluney? I'm assuming that's how you pronounce that?
You know, this entire time I was pronouncing it like George Clooney.
Clooney? Oh, that sounds better than Cluney. Because this whole time I was reading it, I was like, that doesn't sound specifically evil or villainous. Clooney might be better.
I think Cluney would be with two N's, but I've only just now realized that it's like George Clooney has come to take the Abbey.
Like I said, it's better than Cluney. That sounds like an insult.
I mean, it could be.
You big stupid Cluney. Anyway, background. I don't know your background with this. I've heard about it. I heard about it as an adult, other adults talking about their favorite childhood series. And so I kind of knew it by that. Oh, it's about woodland creatures. And it's like, okay, that's kind of all I knew about it. My husband bought it 2 or 3 months back, saw it in the bookstore, and I was like, oh, I'd heard of that, and bought it. And that's all I knew about this book going into it. Have you heard of this series before? You were pretty quick when I was like, we should do Redwall. You were like, yes.
Yeah, Redwall, for me, I had never read the books. I only knew about it from Sunday morning pre-church cartoon Redwall.
Really?
Yep, it was me and my sister in our little church clothes waiting for everybody to get to the car, and Redwall was on, and that's what we watched.
So out of curiosity, does the TV show just do the first book? Because there's apparently 21.
I think it does the first 3. It does Matthias, and it does his son, and it does Martin the Warrior.
Okay, interesting.
So yeah, I had heard about it, but only visually. So actually going back and seeing it written was something else.
It's just like The Last Unicorn all over again.
Yeah, this happens to me. Little Tim was not so much a reader, I think.
But he sure loved the animations of books.
Yep. I didn't realize how many fuzzy critters were in my childhood until you started bringing them up.
You're welcome.
Thank you. This podcast really should be renamed to Horrible Things Happening to Fuzzy Critters.
To be fair, you did pick out 2 of the 3 books.
You know, I'm going to pick out a third one that's equally as horrible when we're done.
Age level. So this is a mid-lit book. A little bit mature for elementary school readers, but I'd say I was in 5th grade reading Series of Unfortunate Events. If you could handle that, you could probably handle this. And content warning mainly revolves around animals. So there's a small degree of separations unless you have a very dear soul, kind of like me, who is like, I'd rather see a person murdered than an animal.
Empathy and overdrive.
Then maybe a little bit worse for you. But we do have animal cruelty and death, murder, kidnapping, blood, graphic violence, racial slur for the Romani, and language and gore.
Fuzzy critters, everybody.
Fuzzy critters. It's different when it's field mice. So literally all I knew about this book was the name, that it's about fuzzy animal creatures, and the cover of the book, which is this mouse holding up a shield and a sword and looking into the sky. And I was like, okay, we have a mouse warrior. And it's probably Arthurian. Maybe he finds the sword that's been missing, or sword in the stone, or gets a sword from a lake, you know, as you do.
Not far off.
Not far off. The cover is very accurate, I think. But what did you think of the cover? I know you already seen the TV show, but...
Well, the thing is, I watched it so long ago that the only real memories I have are buried deep and kind of fuzzy itself. And so, reading it, I knew eventually there would be a sword, and that's pretty much all I knew about it.
I don't know where, I'm pretty sure it's in the very beginning of the book, maybe one of the first lines is that Redwall is where legends are made. Or maybe it's later, I can't remember where that line is. But indeed, yes, that is correct. No, I know where it's from. That's from the cover. Where legends are made, indeed. We went on a trip in our favorite rocket ship.
No, don't you start.
pull up some other childhood memories there. But yeah, so we have Matthias, who has shoes that are too big for him.
Which is apparently his only flaw.
His only flaw is his shoes are too big, and that stops being important
After the 15th page.
Yeah, he keeps tripping a bunch, and the abbot's like, oh, I should get him new shoes. Or something like that.
Yep.
And then it never comes into play ever again.
Yep. My first critique of this book was, man, this character is just perfect.
He's so cute.
I can't really find a reasonable flaw. He's too enthusiastic for good.
I don't know. It's a kid's book. I'm okay with black and white.
Yep, I had to realize that as I was going through it, and it was like an epiphany. It's like a meteor hit me. I'm not reading this as this old guy. I should be reading this as a kid might read this.
Aw, dang it, it's a children's book.
Yeah, it's like the people that have serious, deep reviews of children's shows.
I literally just saw a clip from Taylor Tomlin's late night comedy, and she was in a game show, and it was like, give an adult review of something that was obviously made for children. That's what we're about to do here. Yes and no? I don't know. We have gone really deep on some children's books, but I kind of just want to enjoy it. I don't want to think too terribly hard about it because, yeah, it's a children's book.
Yeah.
In all the good ways that it's a children's book.
Yep.
But I am impressed with the amount of creatures we have. We were talking about it a little bit before we started recording. I have almost 3 pages of names, and some of them, I'm going to argue, majority of them only have rat under their name.
The good old Star Trek red shirts of the enemy.
Got a bunch of sparrows, got a couple moles. We were talking about 75 pages in, and I was like, yeah, there's a bunch of different creatures. And I mentioned a hedgehog, and you were like, well, is there a rabbit? No, there's not a rabbit. 5 pages later.
Yep, I remembered the rabbit. The rabbit stuck with me.
Oh, goodness. So there is a large variety of creatures, unlike Watership Down, which is all rabbits, and The Last Unicorn, which has other creatures, but it's mainly unicorn, singular, because there's only one of them.
Yep, unicorn-centric.
So this has all the creatures, and the way they do it is not like Watership Down, where it's super realistic. What do animals actually do? They're humanoids, basically. They even walk around on 2 feet, moving around and stuff. So think more
Disney's Robin Hood.
That's a perfect example.
Except they're still small. They're still mouse-sized.
Well, to be fair, the creatures in Robin Hood are big, foxes, bears, lions. But yes, these are small creatures. And in Redwall is the name of the abbey, by the way, and it's run by mouse monks for a good majority. They do have some other creatures, such as they have moles that live near them. They have a badger named Constance, who is my favorite character, because every time the abbot goes, no, we shouldn't have violence, Constance is like, get over here right now so I can beat your butt.
Yeah, I think Constance's shoulders must be tired from holding the abbey on her back.
Oh my gosh. And it's so sweet of the abbot to be like, no, I want to leave that they can change. But Constance is over there like, I'm going to create instruments of war.
I'm just going to straight up kill the guy. I'm not waiting for permission.
Let's just see what happens. So I love her.
Yep.
I feel like there's a lot of names we could mention, but I think the important ones here. Matthias, who is the main character, who is the hero. But I like how the book doesn't revolve around Matthias in that he's the only character, he's the only hero. Everyone else is incompetent and waiting for Matthias. Granted, Constance is totally holding it together, but there are other creatures. You have Jess Squirrel, who's pretty cool. We get that rabbit.
Basil Stag Hare.
His name was Basil, and then he's like, you know what's cool? Stags. So he is now Basil Stag. He is a rabbit. He comes up pretty often.
More towards the latter half of the book, right? The second half?
Around 75 pages in. I can say with all assurity, within 5 pages of 75 pages.
So not quite half, just before the half.
Then on the good guy side, you have Methuselah, who's this really old guy.
He's got a wise mentor that isn't the abbot.
But still does stuff. He doesn't just tell, oh, use the force,
Yeah.
He actually is over there running around, solving puzzles, this, that, and the other thing. He apparently is a very good sewer. Props for that. But he's a huge person for a while. Animals actually die in this book, so warning. I've already said that.
Yeah, a lot.
Like a lot.
A lot of animals. I did not expect the mountains of flesh that would be piled up in this little fuzzy children's book.
Yeah. You have Ambrose Spike, who... yeah, I'd put him at like C tier.
He is not fast.
Well, he is not fast, but also he doesn't show up that much. But I felt the need to mention it because you said you love hedgehogs.
I do like hedgehogs.
And the last one I'm going to give for now, Cornflower. I love her. She and Matthias are so cute, but she also kind of has her own thing. She's not just a helpless damsel who's waiting for whatever. She's like, nah, I'm on the bread lines. I'm doing this, that, and the other thing. She comes in clutch later with the tower and burning the tower, but she's pretty great. So Cornflower is also there.
Yep. Nobody's waiting to be saved in this book. Everybody's out there.
Everyone's doing something. They are pulling their weight. There's no dead weight except on Cluney's side. We're gonna go with Cluney. That sounds way better. So on the other side, you have Cluney, and I don't feel like naming any of his other people because they all die.
Yep.
Cluney and his various generals, who happen to be rats, ferrets, and weasels. Those are the three that he particularly likes, which just feels like ferret and weasel slander. But the mice are all living happily in the abbey. They're known for being helpful and pacifist and this, that, and the other thing. So everyone knows them, and it's great and it's wonderful, except for one day, gosh dang Cluney runs into town and he decides, hey, that abbey would make a good palace. I'm gonna take it.
And I have to say, the writing, the introduction of Cluney as he approaches the abbey is magnificent.
Terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. I would be terrified as a child.
Yep, he does an amazing job of hyping Cluney up from never having heard of him to just the first few pages he's mentioned. He is on his way. He is coming closer.
He's inevitable.
Yeah.
And he's evil. He kills one of his men, straight up. R.I.P. Skullface.
Poor Skullface.
Dies in the first, second, third chapter? I don't even remember. I think it's the second chapter.
Yeah, Cluney tells him to get up on the horse, and he does. The horse bucks him off. He falls under the wheels. Cluney's like, what a useless rat.
Bye.
Yeah, and then the pattern just continues with Cluney losing men and not really caring about it.
Oh, you're evil. Okay.
Yep. So props to the author for writing good evil characters.
Although sometimes he's so cartoonish to them, I'm a little bit like, why are you sticking around, guys? How are you not? I was a little surprised that they didn't rise up against him, because that was in the back of my mind. I was literally wondering at one point, I don't remember when, but I was literally wondering, are they gonna switch sides? They don't. They end up all dead. But I was a little curious if they were gonna switch sides and rise up against Cluney, but that does not end up happening.
Yeah, when he's injured, that would have been a perfect time, but everybody just kind of sits back and waits it out.
And they don't run away. And I know they're like, oh, we'll kill you if you don't run away. And I mean, that's a strategy that works in real life, but I don't know. I mean, it's not resourceful. It just doesn't feel sustainable in the long term. And it's not. He ends up dead. But a little something I was thinking, I was like, this doesn't seem sustainable. You're losing a lot of people really fast. Although at the same time, there's so many of them. The first time they rock up, there's 500.
But how many of them die? Because
so many.
And the very first time is when the cart gets overturned and some unknown number are dead or wounded, and Cluney's just like, oh yeah, whatever, go round up the local hoodlums.
Yeah, 2 rats died specifically, and 1 lost a paw, and then a bunch of others are injured, and he's like, cool.
Another successful landing.
Basically. And I'm going to make fun of him because it's so easy to make fun of him. But I swear, you're right. In the book, he is terrifying. He is absolutely terrifying. I hate him. I'm scared. You never know if he's going to succeed because it's one of those books where you're like, I'm pretty sure they're going to succeed, but who's going to be collateral damage? I was so worried about Constance. I was so convinced Constance was going to be a target at some point because she's doing so well. I was thankful she makes it to the end, but terrifying. He's absolutely terrifying. He's evil. He's a villain. He's the worst. So anyway, they have a feast. It's wonderful. It's great. They're on their way home. Cluney passes them. They hide in the bushes so they aren't seen. But they come back and they're like, hey, we think we saw Cluney. They're like, you sure? Because they think he's a myth. like the boogeyman, the thing you tell your kids, don't stay up too late or mind your parents or Cluney will come get you.
Yeah, he's just like the boogeyman to these guys. And then who was it that first broke the news that, oh yeah, he's super real? Was it Methuselah? And he looked up in the records?
So they were like, haha, that's so funny. And then Constance intimidates them to listen. And then Methuselah just pulls out his record and is like, yeah, here's this, and this, and this, and this. Which is ironic because he's the thing of nightmares. But then he has a nightmare, a recurring nightmare, about a great mouse with an ancient sword. Gee, I wonder if Matthias is actually going to become the warrior he wanted to become in the beginning of the book. I'm sorry, am I the chosen one? It's very cute, though. I don't mind it too much. I don't mind it at all, actually. I think it's very good. But there's a map in the beginning of the book, and the abbey is in the middle of the map, and the way at the bottom, you have this church, and there's literally their last name are the church mouse. The church mouse is... that feels weird, which is them and a bunch of their kids, and so it's kind of a big space. So he goes there and makes that his home base, while everyone else tries to figure out what they should do. They think they should fight, and the abbey agrees. So the big thing that they start doing is getting all the creatures in the area that they can inside the abbey, because it has big walls, and it is a good protector spear. It is very much like a castle. The more I read about it, I was like, was this place a castle? This doesn't feel like your everyday monastery. So they get as many creatures as they can inside the walls, and then the rats start running about, and, people are starting to report them. So yeah, Cluney just starts walking up the road to them to be like, hey, surrender. Dad is like, no, thank you.
And Constance says some choice words, probably.
She does eventually. So they let Cluney and one of his lieutenants in. And Cluney is like, hey, you guys should surrender. And they're like, no. And Redtooth, who is the lieutenant with him at that point, does something. And Constance just beats him up immediately. And is like, hey, I'm going to murder you one day. As you do. And so they leave, and Cluney decides, I'm gonna get this place. It's gonna be Cluney Castle. And on his way out, he sees a tapestry, and on it is Martin the Warrior, who is the mouse from his nightmares. Oh no! He must get the tapestry. He must get Martin the Warrior so he can never hurt him.
Yep, it is interesting. I don't know how many authors have done the whole villain being haunted before his death trope.
So many.
Really?
That's a pretty popular trope, I would say. I like how this one is done, because he thinks that it is Martin the Warrior. And shock and surprise, actually it's Matthias!
And as we will find, that's pretty much the same thing.
Yes. It literally is. Even Martin knew that it was the same thing. So as they're trying to get people, there's a family of voles that gets kidnapped, and Matthias is very upset about it. He wants to go and rescue the people, but they point out, hey, right now it's better that you be alive to resist than caught as well. So Cornflower comforts him, and she gives him her headband, which is really cute and makes me think of nights where the maidens would give their handkerchiefs and stuff to them to be like, hey, you have a token of my favor and all that. I thought it was really cute. Everything with them is cute. But not only does Cluney kidnap the voles, he sends a very, very sneaky... He's either a rat or a weasel. They are not sure. As in, Cluney is not sure. So we are not sure.
Yep, but his name is Shadow.
His name is Shadow, and he's all black. He has no other markings. And he is very sneaky. And so he does the sneaky sneak into the monastery so he can steal the tapestry. So Martin the Warrior specifically. He's not taking the whole tapestry. He just rips Martin the Warrior off. And I'm sorry, but he gets over the wall.
Sheer vertical wall climbing.
Yes. He gets up onto the wall, onto the little battlement. He's on the wall. All the other guards that were supposed to be there aren't war ready, and they're fast asleep. And there's a scene of them being fast asleep and it kind of being, I don't know, rainy or something. And Shadows is fixing their hoods. He's like, aw, that fell down. And fixes their hood. He puts it back on him. I'm not surprised this was a children's cartoon because it sounds like one. It was just so so funny. He was like, oh, let me fix that. Moving on.
We have to make sure they don't come awake now. It does kind of feel like some old Disney bit.
It feels like Crunk.
Yes.
Anyway, everything's going great. He gets in there. He gets into the Great Hall. He's tearing it off and whatever. And Matthias has a dream that Martin needs him, which leads to him catching Shadow.
And alerting the rest of the castle, and it's their whole big chase.
Shadow ends up being pushed off the wall. And in response, he just grabs the tapestry, is like, ha ha ha, sucks to suck, and then runs off.
Yep, Cluney just leaves him there to die.
And this is the point where I'm like, I'm waiting for him to ditch the wrong person. So this is what I thought was going to happen. They're pacifists. They want to heal everyone. They want to give everyone a second chance. I thought he was going to leave someone to die. They were going to take care of it. They have a change of heart. And they're like, you know what? I'm going to help you. And it's going to get his comeuppance. That doesn't end up happening, but I wouldn't have been surprised. Because, my dude, it feels like he's running out of people.
Yeah, in fact, the one person they help, the one person from the outside, from the enemy camp that the Redwallers decide to help, ends up stabbing them in the back. And we'll get to that.
So yeah, they don't have that anymore. And Matthias is like, this is too far. You can kidnap our people, but you can't steal our tapestry. Granted, like I said, he was mad about the other thing. But yeah, he just straight up takes Shadow's dagger and he's like, I'm gone. Without telling anyone he's gone. He just disappears. And it works out because Cluney has readied his army, so they're heading out.
Martin actually misses out on most of the big battles in this entire book.
Matthias misses out on all of the major battles. There were so many times. We'll get to it later in the book where I was just sitting there like, how have you not run out of days? There are so many things that so conveniently happen so Matthias can get back. Oh, and he spent the day doing this, and he spent the day doing this, and he spent the day doing this. And I'm just like, how do we have this many days to do things?
Yeah, I feel like the book takes place over an entire summer.
I would need to go down and actually sit there because it shows you every single day. For the most part, there's some battle preparation that skips. I think it takes a month or two for Cluney to get healed again.
Yep, I think just the 1 month because of the whole magic and whatnot.
Yeah, there are definitely things where you're like, that feels convenient, but it's a children's book, so who cares?
Yep.
I mean, I care. I still want children's books to be good, and I don't think this is not good, but they're not inundated with this type of story as much as adults are. Let's say it like that. So there's this rat named Rhaegar. He got lost.
Oh, Rhaegar.
Rhaegar. Okay, maybe that's it. He's a very stupid rat, and he ends up getting eaten by a snake.
Oh, we get to talk about the dragon in this book.
Oh, the dragon.
Yep, every story needs to have a dragon. All of these fantasy, quasi-fantasy, whatever. And Asmodeus is our dragon.
Oh my gosh, named after the devil himself.
The devil himself, Asmodeus the Viper, the serpent.
Yeah, to get to that, Rhaegar is stupid and gets lost on his way from the abbot to Cluney, and Cluney's just like, screw him, whatever, goes with his army. And Rhaegar sees Matthias, and he's like, he, I'm gonna get him, I'm gonna be so sneaky, this, that, and the other thing.
And he talks out loud, doesn't he, as he's doing this?
The book changes narrator, it changes perspective, so it's not all from one perspective. So the chapter is from Rhaegar's perspective, and he's like, ha ha ha, I'm gonna get him. And then it switches immediately to Matthias, who's like, yeah, the dude's right behind me.
Yeah.
This rat has been following me for like 10 minutes. So he ends up laying a trap and ties Rhaegar up. And I was just like, pretty rough. So this is at the point where you were like, hey, are there any rabbits? And I was like, no, I don't see any rabbits. Basil Stagg shows up immediately. And I did not correct myself because I was like, he'll read the book. So Basil Stagg is a wild card. He's very energetic, full of himself.
And very military inclined, like an old-fashioned Victorian officer.
While still being a jokester. It's a very interesting mix of personality traits and formality and informality.
And apparently based on a real person the author met.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
That person would be a trip. Oh my goodness. But Basil Stagg's like, hey, Mouse, what's up? And Matthias is like, hey, I'm doing this thing. And he's like, cool, I'll help you. Why not? And he shows Matthias how to be sneaky and how to dart around so your target doesn't see you and whatnot. And then he goes on to provide a distraction, which is what Basil does most of the time. And he is very good at it because he can just jump up and down out of holes and then yell at them. And he's a trip.
He's probably a lot of kids' favorite character just because of how high energy he is.
Oh, he's a kook. He's a nut. He's so much fun. But in a good way, but definitely not Watership Down Rabbit.
Oh no.
Very different. So he provides a distraction. Matthias gets in there and he's like, oh crap, Cluney's on the way to the abbot because no one's on the grounds. Well, while I'm here... So he rescues the voles. Cluney has the tapestry with him, so we will not get that for some time. Oh, he does manage to save the vole family, and if that son did not shut up, I get that it's scary, but he keeps crying very loudly and giving their position away. So he manages to calm him, and they're walking and whatever, and he literally immediately walks into the sentries rats who are just sitting around because they got tired of trying to get Basil Stagg, and they were like, meh, and they sat down, and then Matthias just walks into the middle of them, and then the chapter changes. Dang it. There were a couple of times where the chapter changes got me. I was like, no! Go back! So Cluney begins his attack, which isn't going as well as he had hoped. He thought they were hillbillies, middle of nowhere nothings, don't know anything about anything, but they're actually very good at protecting themselves from a siege.
Yeah, for an abbey based entirely on pacifism and then also Constance is there, they do pretty darn well.
They have a lot of weapons.
And mostly improvised, too.
Mostly improvised. It's very impressive.
What's that old movie, Left Behind, Left Alone, where the kid has to stay behind and the thieves come in?
Oh, Home Alone.
Home Alone, yeah. It's kind of like that, but medieval siege.
Yes. This is the point. Rhaegar wakes up and he's like, well, that sucked, but I'm gonna get him. Meh, 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 meh. And then Asmodeus shows up, and he's very creepy, and he's very scary, and he's very big.
And he has hypnotic eyes.
I called him Asmodeus because that's what he whispers. And eventually, it is confirmed that it's actually his name. He's not just saying the name of the devil, or in the name of a devil, over and over again. That might have been a little too creepy for a children's book.
I mean, that would be a very good villain. Just go around and say, like, Beelzebub, like, every day.
Yeah.
Every hour. That'd be freaky. That would absolutely freak everyone out.
And so he's specifically called an adder. And so I looked it up, which is the common viper, common European viper. They get big. You and I grew up with copperheads out and about in the woods and whatnot. Kind of looks like that size. Yeah, it's exactly that. Adult adders are 24 to 35 inches long, where adult copperheads are 24 to 36 inches long. I'm impressed with myself for immediately being able to compare it to another snake of size. But he doesn't eat them whole. He just poisons them. And apparently it's a very venomous snake. But did that surprise you? There's no point where he's like, and I put it in my mouth.
I assumed that he ate them.
There's a couple times where he drags them off.
I think only the fox is shown to be disappeared. The rest, you're right, he just kind of leaves them out.
He either leaves them or he drags them off or something like that. There's no nom. And so now I'm looking all of that up. Oh, apparently adders are very shy animals.
Not this one.
Okay, well, here's the thing. They try to avoid contact with people and larger animals. It's estimated that around only 50 adder bites happen a year, and very few require medical treatment. Well, now he feels a lot less dangerous, but to mice, to rats, to apparently foxes...
Yeah, it would be something like a polar bear 5 times its size would be to us.
Yeah.
So yep, he is the dragon of this story.
He is the dragon. He is the devil. He is the undertaker. I think he specifically calls himself an undertaker. Yeah, he's creepy. And he keeps popping up. I know his name is Asmodeus, so maybe it's a little too right in front of me, but he felt like the devil. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, he definitely shows up exactly when you're not expecting him and does something that you're not expecting. Well, once you know who he is, you know what he's going to do.
So he pops up several times and surprises me, and we'll get to it. But with the fox, I knew immediately. I was like, oh no, you just hid somewhere under a tree? That sounds like a snake hiding space. And it was. So, back in what we were talking about, Matthias and Basil work their way out. They get away. And Basil promises, hey, I will protect the voles in my burrow so that Matthias can get back to Redwall. Except, this is the one time. There might be more, but this was definitely a time. Matthias drinks some water, a couple dandelions, and falls asleep. My man.
So maybe he does have a flaw. Maybe I was wrong before.
Narcolepsy.
Yeah.
But that's how this section ends. Matthias falls asleep in the middle of the forest. Cluney is waiting until dark and is fighting the good fight, while Methuselah finds writing behind the tapestry of Martin. So little does Cluney know, his meddling and stealing Martin's tapestry is what sets our hero on the course to find the sword in the first place. Don't you love self-fulfilling prophecies? But yeah, that's how that book ends. There's 3 books in the book, which are kind of parts. So yeah, so book 2 starts. Matthias wakes up from his nap and notices that it's almost night and that he's lost. But thankfully, a baby squirrel shows up and shows him the way. And thus we get Silent Sam.
Deus Ex Squirrelica.
Who's kind of important, but not as important as his mother.
Yeah, this book does have some very powerful women figures in it.
It does. There was a part where later on they need an expert climber, and then they're just immediately like, Jess, the mom who you've not really heard about since the beginning of it, and you're just like, oh, I guess it's Jess.
And then she just gets even better throughout the rest of the book.
And that one climb gets her main character status.
Yeah, she moves from unknown tier to B tier almost instantly.
And it really did feel like, because he was just like, and obviously Jess, because she has a husband and a son. And it did feel a little bit like, I want another female character, and I'm fine with that. But it was very, oh, okay, this person was kind of jarring, but that's fine. Yeah, we have Constance, we have Jess, we have Cornflower, we have, a little bit sad. We have sparrows, but we also have a shrew who ends up dying, and I'm very sad about it. But yeah, we have a lot of female leadership characters.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten to the sparrows yet.
So we'll get to the sparrows.
But going back to where we were, Matthias is being led back to the abbey by the baby squirrel and his family in tow.
Well, his family will soon be in tow. We just get baby squirrel and they're like, oh, baby squirrel, let's get your parents. And then they get his parents. And literally Jess doesn't have a name until they decide that she's going to make the climb. They're just like, oh, your parents. But book 2 begins the quest to find the sword. And it leads to a lot of riddles that Methuselah and Matthias have to work out. And I'm all for it. I think that's when I really started to like the book. I don't know why, but I began the book and I was kind of like, meh, it's fine, whatever. And I started getting into it in book 1, but book 2 was when I went from, I'm reading this because I have to I'm actually really enjoying this.
Do you think the author felt clever for coming up with the riddle and also solving it?
Yes. But we need to talk about the injury because that has not happened yet. We keep referencing Cluney having an injury. Cluney gets a plank, like a wooden plank. And then they climb up a tree, and they're going to use this plank to get from the tree onto the battlement into the abbey, because they can't get in through the door, and they can't go over the walls. So they need to get in some other way. Methuselah picks it out immediately and pulls a, I know something you don't, to the abbot.
Yeah, you referenced him slightly as Yoda earlier, and that really was just a Yoda move.
And the abbot's like, cool, what is it? And he's like, look at that tree. Real weird how the wind isn't blowing, but all those branches are moving. Constance is like, huh. She and her team sneaks over there. They get the plank in, they've climbed high enough, and Cluney's like, I'll go first. And so he's on the plank, about to walk over to the wall, when Constance just knocks the plank off. There are so many times where that happens, and I kind of love the book even more for it. There's so many times where he tries to pull something, and I'm impressed with him as a villain for trying new things, coming up with new things constantly. But it's really fun seeing the defenders get him every single time. I kind of love it.
It is kind of the thing where Cluney is trying to plan like 10 steps ahead, and then all it takes is one person swatting a wooden board to defeat him.
And it's always last minute, except for the tunnel, which we'll get to, which they knew almost immediately. It feels so last minute every single time. It's like that, where Methuselah's like, those branches are moving, and Constance just walks over and just knocks off the plank. It's not super good planning. It's not them thinking 10 steps ahead. It's them looking down and being like, oh, you left your queen open. Take. You're like, dang it. I was so focused over here. I didn't notice that you noticed. But this leaves Cluney close to death, having fallen very high from a tree. This other random mouse named Cheese Thief.
Oh, this is the death of Scrag, too.
This is the death of Scrag. There is a ferret named Scrag, and he's pretty cool. I actually like him a lot. I mean, he's working for the wrong guy, but I like him a lot.
He showed initiative.
Is intelligent, was an actual good leader.
He was competent, which is something you don't see a lot in Cluney's army.
No, because idiots like Cheese Thief push him out of a tree!
Yeah, so in the smacking of the board that Cluney was on and the rest of the rats,
a couple other rats naturally fall out, but then Cheese Thief is like, well, isn't this a perfect time, push?
Yep, and then he's still not dead. Scrag is barely breathing on the ground, and they go and get this makeshift stretcher for Cluney, and Cheese Thief is running alongside, and he's like, Chief, I have to go back and check on Scrag. And then he goes back and stomps him in the throat until he stops breathing, which is one of the most brutal scenes in this brutal children's book.
So Cheese Thief had it coming, is what we're saying.
Yep, poor jealous Cheese Thief.
We'll put a pin in that. So like I said, Cluney's still alive, but he needs time to heal. So thankfully, Matthias and Methuselah now have time to run around and solve ancient puzzles.
Yep, and it just so happens that the riddle is underneath where the tapestry used to be.
Yes, as we found out at the end of book 1. There's a whole meeting where the abbot's like, I don't want to fight. And Constance is like, they're coming back because they're evil. And the abbot's like, yeah, you're probably right. Anyway, you guys can be in charge of that. I'm just going to be in charge of the abbot. Fair man. So the abbot tells Matthias that Methuselah is waiting for him in the Great Hall. This is when he learns that, oh my gosh, there's a thing behind a thing. And so they solve that puzzle, which leads them to another puzzle, which leads them to another puzzle.
It gets very National Treasure very quickly.
It does, and I kind of love it. As all that is going on, because they figure out a poem that figures out a map, and they look at a map, and they find the blueprints, and they look at the blueprints, and they find a secret staircase, and they go to this other thing that does this other thing. It's a whole thing.
Oh, and this is the point where they figure out that Matthias is the reincarnation of Martin.
Yes, and Martin knew he was coming, because in the poem, I am that is.
And I am that is actually an anagram of Matthias.
Why not?
Yep. So they solve a bunch of puzzles.
And as this is going on, Cluney is being healed by this expert healer, Fox.
Yep. Someone who knows the old ways, he says.
So he trusts her, but he doesn't trust her at all, which is good because she's not trustworthy. She immediately wants to sell his secrets to the other side, play both games. And even the narrator, it kind of breaks fourth wall a little bit there, because the narrator's like, it's very dangerous what she's doing, but she's done it well so far. Foreshadowing, are we?
Yep. So the fox has a son, and the son comes important later.
And she has him do a couple things for her, but for the most part, the Cluney and his rats are keeping an eye on her as all these puzzles are being solved in the abbey. The son's name is Chicken Hound. It's kind of perfect. I don't think I ever would have sat there and thought to name a fox Chicken Hound. But where is the lie? But he gives a message to Constance. Hey, we need to meet the abbot. We have information to sell. And Constance doesn't trust him as far as she can throw him. So she decides not to tell the abbot about it. And so Constance goes and decides to meet Chicken Hound. And so that's going to be in 2 days' time. Also, Constance helps with the puzzles. which was kind of cool because the other two are being brainiac and thinking, 4D chess. And she's like, oh, that's a black square. And just like, there you go. So I also love that even when the creatures that aren't considered, intelligent per se, still are helpful and useful. I don't know. Constance is my favorite. Can you tell?
Only a little.
Cluney suspects the foxes and decides to make fake plans. And so he's like, we're going to create a battering ram, and that's going to go through the main gate. But actually, we're going to dig a tunnel under the wall. And so he puts fake plans under his pillow for the fox to see. We're going to put a pause because now we have just squirrels and the sparrows. Through a very, not complicated, but a long string of puzzles, they come to find out that the sword is hidden near the top of one of the tallest towers. I think on a weather vane.
Yep.
And Just Squirrel goes up and makes it all the way up there and gets attacked by sparrows.
And finds that the sword is not there.
I kind of wanted to throw something because they're like, oh no, where could it possibly be? After Matthias has been specifically told by Methuselah that there was a sparrow falcon that said the sparrows stole something valuable from the abbot.
Yeah, and that was like in the first few chapters, wasn't it?
It was so early.
Yep, I think I got a bit frustrated too, because hey, they stole something precious from us. Also, we have no idea where the sword is. And it's like, man, for all that 5D chess thinking that you've got going on, you can't put two and two together.
Intelligence and wisdom are two different skills.
Yeah, they failed to check for that.
So I knew immediately when they mentioned that in the very beginning of the book, I was like, oh, there's the sword. But I was going to give it to them until this point where they're like, oh no, but where could it possibly be? I wanted to throw something at them, but I can't because they're imaginary creatures.
Oh, and this is when we're back to the fox.
Yeah, we're back to the fox. So Sella actually does manage to get out and go talk to Constance, which if you're having to kick loose away from your rats, you're lucky those rats are idiots.
Yeah, I don't think there's a rat with a triple-digit IQ except Cluney.
It's a whole thing. Anyway, so she actually meets with Constance, and Constance just straight up steals the plans and is like, I'm not paying you a dime. Whap.
Yeah, you talk about chaotic good.
She's just like, this is what you get for being a double agent. Knocks her out. And then uses her to lure out one of the rats. Redtooth, who I mentioned earlier. And she's like, hey, we have something to finish. This woman is secretly murderous. She really is a badger.
Yeah, she just straight up kills him.
Oh, it's cute and sweet and is an adorable little animal. Murderer!
I don't think badgers and sweet have been put in a sentence.
So yeah, she kills Redtooth, and it's just like, ha ha ha. And so the fox and Fangburn, who's this other random rat, who, like I said, the names don't even matter, but they make up a story. But instead of actually getting their story straight, I guess they had just had a loose outline, because when Cluney asks them literally any questions, they say the opposite. In one of those, what direction? And one of them says north, and the other one says east, but they say it at the same time, and then they look at each other awkwardly, and one of them is like, in a northeast direction, y'all. But they do learn about the battering ram. So they're going to reinforce the door, and they're going to do this, that, and the other thing to make sure that they can withstand the battering ram. Including, he ends up just telling them to get out instead of, murdering them like he likes to do. But he's just like, yes, they now know the fake plan, but not my real plan. And then Asmodeus eats Redtooth. Hi, Asmodeus, you're going to keep popping up, aren't you?
Uh-huh. This is his own hype. Cluney had a big hype train right at the beginning of the book. Asmodeus is this sinister background character.
Just keeps popping up, who scares the living crap out of me every time. He's just creepy. But thankfully, our main characters have finally figured out, hey, you need to go to the sparrows.
Oh, and earlier, a sparrow was injured. Did we mention that?
A sparrow was injured while attacking Jess. One of the archers actually shot it, which they were trying not to shoot them, just scare them off. And so they capture the sparrow, and the sparrow is named Warbeak. And what is it with cute furry creatures making friends with birds that want to murder them? I love it. I didn't know this trope existed, and now it's my favorite.
It's just our peculiarities with air power has to seep into every single story now.
Clearly. Because she's like, I am going to murder you. And Matthias is like, That's great. Can you come with me? Only if I can murder you!
Yeah, she is openly murderous, and the way they become friends is Matthias hangs her. He has her on a leash, and he just drops her over the side of this building and just lets her choke.
If you try to murder me one more time, I am throwing you off this. And she's like, okay, I won't try to murder you.
And then they become friends.
And then after a series of very simple problems, they become besties.
Remember, kids, if you want to make friends, try killing them first.
Both of them. Yeah, both sides.
I feel like this podcast needs a disclaimer now.
I do say murder in the content warning.
Goodness gracious. But yeah, Warbeak and Matthias, equally murderous.
To be fair, Matthias does also feed her candied nuts. So...
Yep, which apparently are a sparrow favorite.
So, trying to murder them and then bribing them with sweets. This is our interpersonal skill lesson of the day. Yeah, they create a bond very quickly. To the point of when they finally do get to the roof, Warbeak is like, hey, let's not kill him. Let's not murder him. He is my friend now. I love bird friends. But, so there's a sad thing that happens with the foxes. They find them eavesdropping. And so Sella and Chicken Hound learned about the tunnels. And then Clunny pulls like, you know what to do. And then off screen, they may or may not get murdered.
Yeah, no, there is no maybe. They just die.
Well, Sella dies. She is murdered. Chicken Hound is not murdered. And so he ends up crawling down the road.
It's a gruesome scene, by the way. He describes the flies and everything.
And Chicken Hound is like, cool, she was lame anyway.
Yeah, that scene, that took me out a little bit. Because I'm like, man, this guy does not have a high opinion of these kinds of people.
Well, I feel like he kind of had to. Because if he was actually upset that his mother died, that might have been a little too much, having this child weep for his dead mother.
Yeah, instead he's just like, man, sucks to be you.
I'm just so smart and clever, I didn't die. Like, okay, you got a little Cluney in you, I see here. But he offers the information to the abbot, and so the abbot gives him care, and he does provide the information that they're going to tunnel. And I love that their answer to this is just cool. The moles will pay attention to underground. Anyway, it's such a non-issue. I honestly wonder, did they need Chicken Hound to say that? I feel like the moles would just notice one day, like, people are tunneling under us. Anyway, that is some dramatic irony that will not pay off until much later, because the Cluney and the team think they don't know about it until they pop out of the ground, and then they immediately get murdered. They get wrecked. But to really quickly sum up the sparrow thing, because the king is trying my patience on purpose, like that's the point of the scene, but he's trying my patience. Matthias gets given to his sister as a pet, okay, which is fine. Dunwing and Warbeak is Matthias' friend. So they're just hanging out, and Matthias gives him all these candied nuts, and he gives him the scabbard. Is that what I'm thinking of? The sword holder?
He has the sword, and I think Matthias already has the scabbard.
Yeah, because he found a shield underground, but couldn't find the sword. And then they were like, oh, the sword's hidden. And then it wasn't in the weather vane because it's stolen. Confirmed, the king does have it, by the way. And after trying to win his favor, it's just not working. Warbeak and her mother create a diversion, and it was like, hey, there's this thing, you better go save yourself. But come to find out, he doesn't have the sword anymore, because Dunwing explains, oh yeah, my husband and him were on a mission, and then he was just carrying the sword around because he thinks it looks cool, and then a snake surprised him, and now the snake has it. I knew Asmodeus was gonna come around. I guess I was surprised how directly he became part of the plot, because I thought he was just going to be that kind of devil over your shoulder kind of figure every once in a while pops up and gets the evildoer or whoever. But no, he becomes directly a part of the plot. How does a snake take a sword? How does a snake drag a sword to his hiding place? I had questions.
There's a lot of questions about this book, like the barn that comes up in just a bit.
Is human-sized.
Yeah, there's a lot of human background kind of things and no humans. And also the sizes of animals are really inconsistent.
Yeah.
But I think it explains it in that this being the first book, he didn't really think too much about the sizes and all that. And in the next book, it's kind of more generalized.
Is it? Have you read the second book?
No, No, I just looked up, here's trivia about Redwall.
Ah,
So snakes and vipers and things are always going to be dragon-sized,
okay.
but badgers, mice, and rats are always going to be vaguely human-sized. But not now. Right now, a badger is badger-sized.
And a mouse is mouse-sized.
Yep.
Also, fun fact, Sam and Jess and Basil get the tapestry back.
Yeah, in a carnival-like atmosphere.
It really is.
Of just running circles around the rats in this daylight raid.
Yeah. We did it! Yay!
Yep, Basil does get slightly injured.
He does. He's war wound. He needs more food. He needs sustenance.
Yeah, a superficial wound he plays up.
My battle scar. Eventually, Matthias does manage to get the sword holder, which is hidden under a chair, which I have questions. How did they steal the chair?
I think even Matthias had a question about that chair.
Because there's no way they made that chair. Anyway, that's beside the point. After a couple setbacks, he manages to actually get off the roof. He gets Jess's attention. Oh my gosh, they plan a rendezvous that Jess is going to come up and help him get down. And he looks down and he's like, hey Jess, I'm up here. And the king's like, oh, well then. Oh, there's a whole fight. And the king and Matthias go falling off the roof, and they treat him like he's dead for a long time. To the point I was actually wondering, sorry, we're too busy learning that Chicken Hound is robbing the place blind, and ha ha ha, he runs away, and he gets away. Actually a sad thing. Chicken Hound, in his trying to escape, accidentally kills Methuselah.
Yep, and I think it's good writing. When I tried to read it the first time, I was like, wait, no, that can't be right. Death by accident? But this is how death works. Even something that wasn't meant can still happen like that.
But yeah, he gets pursued by Constance and her team, and he hides. And I immediately where's the snake? And oh, yep, there's the snake! So they have a mourning for both Matthias and Methuselah. But, oh my gosh, he was in the river? That one's not 100% clear, but they do manage to find his body and get him breathing again, so that's really good. During this, Matthias has a dream where he gets to have closure with Methuselah. That's pretty cool, actually. I'm very happy that he was able to get that. But then Martin warns him about Asmodeus, which has me curious. Maybe it's just because they have such a connection, but this is the fourth time that a visage of Martin has told Matthias something that is actually happening / about to happen. I don't know if you want to count Cluney's nightmares, but that also seems like an omen. I have a question how dreams work. Anyway, he heals up, and Basil Stagg's like, hey, if you want to find Asmodeus, you need to go talk to Snow. General Snow, who is an owl who will eat you immediately, but thankfully I have this shiny badge here that he gave me, because I saved his life. Basil Stagg coming in clutch. So Matthias sneaks out and is going to find the owl, and he is not going to be back till the end of the book, because he runs into, how would you say this, Gausim?
Goosum? That's how I said it.
Guosim. Anyway, he runs into a bunch, and I do mean a bunch, of shrews. 500 shrews. That's a lot of shrews. I kind of like that the different creatures have different societies. The shrews are apparently very democratic. They also have a talking stone, otherwise they argue too much.
I thought this was something, because this guy probably lived through the hippie era and the whole underground guerrilla movements of that.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like this is definitely a takeoff on the whole Monty Python People's Party of Judea versus the Judean People's Party kind of deal.
Oh yeah. It was humorous at points, frustrating at other times, which I think is the point.
Yeah. I like in a few chapters, he just tosses the stone away.
Throws it.
Yep.
But yeah, there's another shrew called Logalog. Oh, and Gausim got her name because it stands for, I'm not even going to say the whole thing, but it's like Guerrilla Warfare of Shrews. It stands for their organization, and she's leader, so she gets the name Gausim, which makes me wonder what her name was before? Or was that her name, and then they made the acronym to match? I don't know, but I have questions. Oh, 50 shrews, not 500. Sorry.
50 shrews is still a lot.
That's still so many shrews. But he explains the task, and they're like, oh, we'll give you food and rest and help you navigate to the abandoned farmhouse. Abandoned farmhouse. Who abandoned it? The cat's still there. The owl's still there. Who made it? What's happening? Why is it so big? because it does seem like human size where he is small and tiny, and kind of like rescuers down under where they're little mice. They're human-sized stuff, but oh well. Instead of running into Owl, he runs into a cat. Well, literally drops into the mouth of a cat as it's yawning. But thankfully, the cat is pescatarian and is sworn off eating mice or shrews. And so he just spits them out and is like, that was disgusting. I can't. That's so zany. And sometimes reading children's book makes me realize I'm not as creative as I wish I was. Because I don't think I could have come up with that if I tried, but it's so good. Oh, end of book 2, Cluney has the sun in his army's eyes. Oh no! It ends the book, and the war goes on. Which, speaking of some of the stunts they pull back at the main house, and really is just by the skin of their teeth sometimes. Silent Sam finds a hornet's nest?
Just about, yeah. They just find a hornet's nest.
And so they put it into a drum and throw it down on them, on the battering ram people. So everyone gets stung. And then, like, the next chapter is Cluney hiding inside the tunnel with as many people as they can get inside the tunnel, hiding from the hornets. And they're like, well, they can't pull up a hornet's nest every day. It's so good. And then they threw slippery vegetable oil down on it. And then now they can't use their battering ram. Constance and a beaver makes a crossbow?
Yeah, just like a ballista. Just this giant crossbow.
Because Constance decides if you cut off the head, the body will die.
And so just gonna straight up assassinate Cluney the Scourge.
In secret. But they only have one, so they have to make it count. Except they fall asleep and don't see that Cluney leaves his tent, so they end up hitting Cheese Thief, who decides to dress up like Cluney.
Yeah, Cheese Thief is having his best day. He's dressed up like Cluney in Cluney's tent because he left him in charge. He's going full-on, full-tilt fantasy world. And he just takes a full crossbow bolt right through the chest.
Which, this is a weird thing. This might be a printing thing. I wonder if, because every chapter has an image with the number. I'm wondering if the photo for Book 2, Chapter 23, and Book 3, Chapter 1 were switched. Because the photo for Chapter 1 is a hornet, but that happens in Chapter 23, where the Chapter 23 photo is a rat wearing a crown being killed. And so I really do wonder if those got switched. I have questions, but that's totally beside the point. We can sum up Cluney's plans as he tries a bunch of things and nothing works.
And then it fails.
The tunnel is probably the funniest. Not funny, ha-ha, but funny people get murdered.
Yeah, I keep on saying the word gruesome because there is no other word for so much of what happens in this book.
If you think too much about it, really though.
The boiling water.
They boiled water, and so as soon as a rat digs into the monastery, they have 2 giant vats of boiling water that they pour down there, and then they jump up and down until the tunnel caves in.
So they just made like rat stew.
And a lot of people die that way. And I don't know, it's just the dramatic irony of it all. Every once in a while they'll mention, oh yeah, the moles are looking around. They think it'll take like 2 days or whatever. And it's like, oh yeah, the moles have perfectly marked out on the ground where the tunnel is. And then you switch to the other side and they're like, hee hee hee, they'll never catch us, ha ha ha. They don't even understand what happened even after they get attacked.
Goodness gracious.
Oh my gosh.
Where's Matthias right now?
Yeah, let's just do all of Matthias's real quick here.
This is a long book, by the way.
Surprisingly long book for a children's book.
And we are going more in depth than we have on some other books.
Yeah, and that's why I'm going to summarize book 3 because it's pretty straightforward on Cluney's part. He keeps trying stuff and then failing. So Matthias talks to the cat, and the cat used to be friends with Snow, but they had an argument and now they don't talk to each other. And so he sends them to the owl, and they clearly have issues and whatnot. Talks to the owl, finds out, hey, this is where Asmodeus is. Manages not to get eaten by the owl. And Matthias ends up making a bet with Snow that if Matthias can kill Asmodeus and come back alive, the owl can never eat another mouse or shrew for as long as it lives, but also he has to apologize to Snow. It really is a clutch. Snow's like, ha ha ha, if you win, I'll even apologize. And that ends up being great. They go to an abandoned mine?
A quarry, apparently. And it's like not a human quarry, a mouse quarry.
But the tunnels are huge because Asmodeus can move around. Anyway, those questions aside, he and the shrews go to there. Log-a-log, him, and Gosum go into the tunnels. Gosum actually ends up being dead, and it's actually a very sad scene because Matthias sees them sitting, and he runs up to them and then sees that she's been poisoned. And it's very sad. But he manages to find the sleeping Asmodeus, which, by the way, sleeps with a very, very thin eye flap, so it looks like he's awake.
Another thing I liked about these tunnels is apparently they're like primordial snake tunnels. He looks at the carvings and it's like, oh yeah, snakes have been here. And then he goes even further in and it's like primitive snake art. And it's like, oh, they've been here forever.
Which, do they make the snake art with their fangs? Do they make it with their tails?
They actually started with arms and then evolved into just serpentine forms.
So they can no longer art. They've actually been cursed. They pissed off a god because they were too good at art, and now they can't art.
Man, Satan just ruined it for everybody.
Oh, right there. I was thinking of the Greek gods, honestly, but...
Thou shalt crawl on thy belly.
Sorry, imagining snakes with arms is always very funny.
Isn't that just lizards?
No, it has to be like human arms or something weird.
I don't want to know what snakes would do with opposable thumbs.
Oof.
But anyway, back to Asmodeus with his eyes almost open.
But he's asleep. So Matthias manages to sneak past him, gets the sword. But Log-a-Log found the dead body and is screaming, "My man, I know you're upset, but that is not the thing to do." Ends up making Asmodeus. And so they run away. They manage to burrow out, even though Asmodeus keeps tunneling as well, but manages to kill Asmodeus.
Just like a berserker rage flows into Matthias.
And he's one with the sword. So he manages to kill Asmodeus, goes back, talks to the owl, makes him keep his promise, not only about the shrews and the mice, he makes him apologize to the cat, who immediately is like, "No, it's my fault," and one of those, and you're like, okay, you don't mean that, but okay. They make up and whatever, and this is when he's like, "And I feasted with the shrews and fell asleep." You're running out of days. How is the siege still going? Ugh, it's a whole thing. Anyway, Cluney manages to get the upper hand in a shocking turn of events. Well, shocking to me. He manages to trick one of the creatures to grease one of the doors, and they get in that way. So after all his planning, the answer was walk through the door. Fine, whatever. So he gets in, puts a rope over Constance, holds everyone up, no one wants to die or see people die. So Cluney is all victorious. He's gonna face his subjects. He's gonna murder everybody. The abbot pulls a, "I refuse to bow to you," which is pretty cool on his part. I'm all for it.
Yeah, it's like that scene from Mulan where the emperor is like, no matter how the wind howls, the mountain will not bow.
Yes, it's so good. And then Basil Stagg is jeering him. And I just can't even imagine. Cluney's so used to probably a certain type. And so he's finally managed the siege. He sees his subjects before him. He wants him to beg and plead for their life. And they're all just like,
"Nah, I'd win."
All of them. Constance wakes up. She's like, "I want to take you in a fair fight." And she's like, he's being heckled. His victory speech. Yeah,
by people that are absolutely powerless. They have to beat Constance into unconsciousness twice. They're just hitting her with sticks.
Because if she's awake, she's straight up gonna murder him. And she's like, can you imagine being an evil king and getting there and everyone's just heckling him?
Oh, and the part that I liked about this is Cluney straight up says, "I had a dream, and in the dream they said that I would have no more nightmares after today."
I know. That was some foreshadowing. I was like, oof, my man.
I was like, you took that in a very positive way, Cluney. I kind of admire your optimism.
Oof, that was rough. I was like, ooh, that doesn't mean what you think it means.
Yeah.
Because then Matthias shows up with just an army of shrews.
Shrews and then sparrows, too.
And then sparrows? And then, oh, by the way, they open the door to run away, and there's a cat and an owl.
Yeah, and the owl made no promises about rats.
Specifically. That was the thing. I was expecting Matthias to be like, "Hey, I know you're super hungry. I know a place where you could get a great meal." He doesn't. Little shocked, but I was totally expecting that. So yeah, Matthias ends up fighting Cluney. They have an epic battle until it's not so epic and they both need to sit down. And the first time ever, maybe we're getting something, maybe, and it doesn't really talk about it, but Matthias makes a promise to Cluney, and I'll put quotes around it, keeps it. There was another creature Cluney had kidnapped him. He's like, hey, let him go and I'll come down there, because he's up in the bell tower and Cluney's below. He's like, fine. Cluney lets go of him because he's a warrior, always keeps his promise, and then he gets smashed by a bell.
Yeah, Matthias cuts the rope holding the giant bell, and then he walks down the stairs. He's like, I said I'd come down.
I see you.
Yeah, it's kind of like that supervillain thing where it's like they're holding somebody outside a window and it's like, I promise I'll let them go, and then they just drop them.
Yeah, but they don't talk about it. No one talks about it. It's like, hey, Matthias, you gotta be careful.
Yeah, it's kind of a monkey's paw kind of deal, but you know what? He's the hero. Cluney is objectively evil, even by his own standard.
So there you go. And he gets out. The rest of the court has been killed. The abbot is dying and names this random guy as his successor. Cool. Hi, Alf. You were mentioned once in the beginning and randomly other times. But specifically, he's like, hey, Matthias, because this whole time Matthias has been an initiate to the abbot. He wants to become a full monk. And he's like, no, you cannot become a monk, because I ship you and Cornflower too hard.
Yeah, by the way, how old are Cornflower and Matthias?
I consider them like early 20s.
Okay.
Human equivalent. I have no idea what the mouse equivalent to that is.
Because you have to understand, when I watch the show, he's being voiced like a 16, 14-year-old kid.
Oh, does he have like a Naruto voice?
He's just like this little mouse. He's not in his 20s at all. He's just like a teenager. And then at the very end of the story, and it's like, you should have kids with this specific woman who's standing right here. And it's like, oh, this is medieval.
Yeah, that feels a little like the Naruto effect, because you have all the other kids and they have kid-ish voice, but their voice actors are basically the same for when they're older and when they're younger. Like Sasuke has a deep voice and Sakura has a very feminine voice, and you have Naruto who's like, believe it.
Oh, man.
But yeah, instead of becoming a monk or a brother, you're going to become the champion. And we're going to call this sword Rat Death. Okay.
Which is kind of amazing in that the sword did not have a name until then.
I really think the sword had a name, but they just renamed it. Or if they forgot what the name was or something. Something ridiculous. But yeah, in the end, Matthias and Cornflower have a child and is the longest name ever.
Let's see, what was his name? It's
Matthias Matteo, as in a nickname, Methuselah Mortimer.
Goodness gracious. Good alliteration, though. I always appreciate names that alliterate.
Did you notice all of the mouses have M names? Even Alf, you come to find out he goes by Alf, but his real name, which you find out in the last chapter, is like
Mordalphus.
So all of the mice have M names.
The abbey mice, the church mice are different.
Yeah, because Cornflower is named Cornflower, that's not an M, but all the brothers have M names. I just thought that was very interesting.
It's tradition.
So they have a kid, and the kid loves playing with the sword, and they have a feast, and the shrews have made friends with the bees. The best line in the entire book. And the shrews have even begun learning their language so that they can argue with them.
Oh, by the way, I don't think we ever mentioned that Methuselah and Matthias are the only ones that speak the bird language.
And they're kind of the only ones that really speak the mole language at one point.
And that never comes up at all.
Nope. They're just like, there's a sparrow in the garden. And Matthias is like, I know, I can sneak to it. Runs off.
Yep.
Which we didn't mention. Warbeak becomes the new queen, which is great because the old king was terrible.
He was like Caligula or Nero, just insane.
Insane, and it wasn't a good time. So she's queen, and that's pretty great. Everyone's pretty happy. The sparrows and the mice are now friends. The mice and the shrews are now friends. All the other furry animals are friends. They have a feast. The bell is recast into two smaller bells, which are rung by the twin mice. They were baby mice twins, and they grow up and they ring bells together. It's so much cuteness. I can't. But yeah, this is the book.
Yep, that's it.
General thoughts. I missed so many great books as a kid. I feel like this podcast is just me reinventing my childhood. Like the things I should have read as a child.
You know, I like Second Childhood as a podcast name better than Horrible Things Happening to Fuzzy Creatures.
Second childhood. Yeah, I got really into this book. I don't know why, but when I started out, like I said, I was kind of meh. We started out, I was just like, whatever, another book, whatever. And I got really into it. Just another book where I'm like, so I'm going to read this to my child.
We're filling up the kids' bookshelf, huh?
Really are. I cannot tell you how many books I've read at this point where I'm like, so I'm going to give this to my kid. Didn't know this existed 3 weeks ago, but now I'm obsessed.
He'll appreciate it.
Hopefully. But watch him not. Not like any of the books I bring up. He's like, these are boring. I want to read about spaceships. I don't know.
Oh, no.
I don't know what he would say. I don't know what you could say as a kid. No, I want to read books about...
Skibbity. Where's Skibbity?
This isn't Skibbity. Oh, but I literally talked to my husband about this. I was like, what do you think the teenage language will be in 10 years?
I don't know. I really liked this book. I started this as, oh yeah, this is a series that I watched as a kid that I can't even remember that much of. But when I finally got into the mood of this is a children's book and I should enjoy it as a children's book, it became so much better for me. When you finally let go of all of, oh, I've seen this trope before, or oh, there's not enough black and white and moral ambiguity, you can just enjoy it as a story. And that's something that I finally ended up doing, and I feel like I'm a better person for it.
Gotta learn how to let go.
Yep.
But one question for the author. I am really curious if he read Watership Down. So like I said, this book came out in 1986. Watership Down came out in 1972. Just saying, there was time.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you read it and he was inspired, or, I mean, he probably talked a lot about his inspiration, but I'd be very curious if you read Watership Down specifically, mainly because we recently read it.
So I know that from just the trivia and things I've read, that this being the first book, he had to clarify a lot of things, like the sizes of the animals, humans, religion, all that kind of stuff. He had to go back and either do interviews or other books would explain things.
21 of them.
Yeah, 21 books. And my question would be, if you could rewrite the first book, just do a Redwall director's edition of a book, what would you change? If you could redo it, the very first book, so that it matches all the other books better, how would you do it?
What little things would you add?
Yeah, just a little changes. What would you add or what would you take off? Not that this was an unfinished book, but it's just that slight different from the other ones. What would you do to make this puzzle piece fit?
It's always fun to ask an author, what would you do differently?
Yep, the little variations. That's what I love.
Rating. I would give this Facing a Nightmare Head On out of 10. I feel like sometimes you have dreams and you have nightmares and you wake up and you're like, oh, it was a nightmare and whatever. But then you have dreams, I don't know about all people, but I've had dreams where it's a nightmare and then I was like, well, screw this person. I'm going to have a happy ending. And then I have a happy ending. And I like those dreams way more than even some of my happy dreams where I'm just triumphant. Is pretty great.
I would give this a verminous chivalry out of 10. Almost every single creature in this book can be considered a pest to crops or humans or domesticated beasts. They are all vermin. But vermin does not necessarily mean a bad thing. It's just their species.
Sometimes the ecosystem needs them.
Yeah, this is a chivalric tale.
This is very Arthurian, but mice.
Yeah, but mice. And so it's just this little epic, not Tolkien-esque, but just this fun, happy, go-get-em night story done completely with vermin. It has humor, it has death, it'll move you.
Read again, yes.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I would read this again.
Further, I would read more of the series. I think that says even more. But have you read this book? If you could be a woodland creature, what would you be? Do you have any book recommendations for us? Tell us all about it in the comments below. If you like the video, hit like. And if you're enjoying yourself, hit subscribe for more. Thank you for exploring Redwall with us.
Join us next time when we'll be covering The Good, the Bad, and the Aunties by Jessie Q. Sutanto.
I'm Sam Reiner.
And I'm Tim Bergman.
And we hope to see you and a friend here next time. Escape With Me Book Club is a Lunar Skull production. Check us out on TikTok or Instagram to keep up to date with us. Lunar_SKULK.